Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
I never imagined my life would fall apart so quickly. My wife, Caroline, a picture of beauty and grace, was living a double life. Every Friday, she left our home, our life, to be with another woman. I found out through the cold, hard evidence of photographs and recordings, each one a dagger to my heart. Betrayal became my new reality, and revenge my sole purpose. I was not done. I made sure her lover's spouse knew everything. This is not just my story, it is our nightmare. What the heck do you think you were doing? I yelled at the woman checking the meter. I am writing you a ticket for overtime parking, she said calmly, not even bothering to look up from her pad. Are you just waiting for the meter to run out so you can ticket me? I shouted again. No, but if I had time, I might think about it, she snapped back. You must be fun at home, I grumbled. Look, Mr. Matt, she said, finally looking up. I am tired of your rude language and bad behavior. I have put up with it until now, but I have had enough. I am reporting you to the police for harassment. You big jerk, I yelled. Go ahead. You will probably find them at the donut shop. With that, I yanked open my Range Rover door and slammed it shut. I started the car and drove off. About a kilometer down the road, I realized I needed gas, which was one of the reasons I had come to town in the first place. I pulled into a Shell station and filled up. As I left the station, I heard a siren. I checked my mirror and saw a police car flashing its lights right behind me. I pulled over to the first spot I saw, fuming with anger. Grabbing my wallet for my driver's license, I reached into the glove box for my registration. I rolled down the window, bracing for the officer. Good afternoon, Mr. Matt. May I see your license and registration, please? He asked politely. I handed them over without a word, but I was seething inside. That woman had turned me in, and I was already thinking about how to get back at her. Mr. Matt, I hear you had a conversation with Miss Wallington a few minutes ago, the officer said. Yeah, so what? I replied angrily. She says you were rude and threatening. You know that is against the law, right? He said, still keeping his calm tone despite my attitude. That is nonsense. I swore at her because she deserved it. I did not threaten her, I said, making no effort to hide my anger. Mr. Matt, you cannot mistreat public workers. It is illegal. They have protection against people like you, he said, still composed. Look, officer, she only got hired because her husband is on the town council. She is not good at anything, I shot back. Is it your goal to make everyone in this town angry? He asked, his patience thinning. Nope, just the people who deserve it, and she is one of them, I snapped. She is just doing her job, he replied, regaining his calm. Last time I was in town, I did not have a coin for the meter, so I went to get some change. When I got back, she was already writing me a ticket. And you wonder why I think she is useless? I shouted. Maybe people do not like you because of how you act. Have you thought about that? He asked. I do not care what anyone in this town thinks. Are you going to arrest me or write me a ticket? I asked, exasperated. Mr. Matt, I would like to get you into therapy, but I do not have enough evidence. For now, I suggest you stay out of trouble. If we get any more complaints, you might face jail time. Do you understand? He said firmly. Yeah, I got it, I muttered as I started the car. I pulled away slowly, making sure to follow every traffic rule. The police car followed me for a few blocks before turning off. Just another perfect day in my perfect life. I was not always like this. I used to be a nice guy. I had a good job, a nice house in the suburbs, a lovely wife, 2 kids, and 2 cars. It was the perfect life. I worked in Toronto at Prim Exile, a company that made electrical hardware. I was the product development manager. Our job was mostly to find new products made by competitors and create our own versions. We barely spent any money on original ideas, but we poured millions into copying others. My name is Jeffrey Matt. My wife is, or was, Joyce Matt. We have 2 kids. Rick is 28, married, with 3 kids of his own. Last I heard, he was in Europe working in the oil and gas industry. Kirsten is 24, single, but living with some guy in a commune in British Columbia. I have not spoken to her in about a year. I am somewhat estranged from my kids, but that is not what made me like this. This all happened 2 years and 4 months ago on a quiet Sunday afternoon. A few years back, my wife went back to work once our kids were old enough to take care of themselves. She wanted more to do than just vacuuming and doing laundry. I did not mind. It brought in extra money we could use for vacations or maybe even a cottage near Georgian Bay. She did well at an insurance company and quickly moved up to a mid-level management position. I was impressed with how fast she climbed the ladder. One day, she came home and told me her company was sending her and 12 other female managers to a retreat for a week. She said it was one of those touchy-feely self-help things big companies do to make themselves look good. I thought it was a waste of time, but I nodded and said the right words. She seemed excited, so I figured, why not? Let the company spend its money if it makes them look good. She left on Monday morning and was supposed to return Sunday afternoon. She and 2 friends from work took her car somewhere north of Barrie. A retreat or a resort, I was not sure. She left an emergency number, but I never needed it. That Sunday afternoon, I was in the basement fixing an old toaster when I heard the garage door open. I put my tools away, turned off the light, and headed upstairs. When I reached the kitchen, Joyce was not there. As I walked down the hall, she stepped out of the back bedroom, still wearing her sneakers, which she never did inside the house. "Hi, how was the retreat?" I asked, moving toward her for a hug. She held out her hands to stop me. I noticed she looked pale. "Joyce, what is wrong?" "You look terrible," I said, my worry growing. "Jeff, we need to talk. Let us go into the kitchen." "I need a glass of water," she said, her voice serious but avoiding my eyes. "Joyce, are you okay? What is going on?" I asked, feeling even more uneasy. She poured herself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, still not looking at me. I sat across from her, waiting. "Jeff, something happened to me this week. It is very important and has changed my life," she began slowly. "Joyce," I started to say. "Jeff, please let me finish. It is hard enough to explain to myself, let alone to you," she said, her voice low and nervous. That was when I knew this was not going to be good news. "Jeff, I have realized I need to change my life to be happy and complete. I cannot do that with the way things are now. I need a complete break from it." She paused and finally met my eyes. "Jeff, I want a divorce. I need a divorce. I have to make a clean break." "What?" My voice must have been louder than I intended because she flinched. "A divorce? Why? What reason could you possibly have?" I demanded. "I do not think you will understand, Jeff. It is not about anything you did or did not do. It is about me, about trying to be a more complete person," she explained, now looking straight at me. "What does that even mean? Do you have a boyfriend or something?" I asked, my anger rising. "How could you think that? I have never cheated on you and never would. This is about my needs," she said, now sounding defensive. "Your needs?" I repeated, my voice growing louder. "What about my needs? What about our 31 years of marriage? What about our children? Do your needs matter more than that?" I knew you would not understand, but it does not change anything. "Jeff, I will file for divorce tomorrow. I will get my things and leave now. My lawyer will contact yours. I assume you will use Scott Olson?" she asked, almost calmly. "Just like that? You are going to walk out and end a 31-year marriage for no good reason? Are you on pills, Joyce? Have you been drinking? You would not understand, and I will not waste my time trying to explain," she said coldly, dismissing me so easily. "Well, you better explain, Joyce. If you think I am just going to let you walk out, you are wrong," I said, now furious. "There is no need for that kind of language, Jeff," she scolded. "Tell me exactly what happened at that camp," I demanded. "You are not leaving until I get the full story. I refuse to discuss this with you when you're in this state. Talk to my lawyer, Claire Lapointe," she said firmly. "Since when did you have your own lawyer, Joyce? Have you been planning this?" I shouted. "That is none of your concern." "And no, I have not been planning this," she replied. And just like that, our long conversation ended, leaving me stunned and broken. "It just happened this week," she said more calmly. "So that is it? 31 years of marriage gone because some guy in weird pants gave you a pep talk? You must be out of your mind. Nobody with a bit of sense would buy any of this. What did you do up there that made you want to throw away our marriage?" I asked, trying to stay calm yet firm. "You would not understand. He helped me find the real me. He showed me I could be much more, but I had to leave everything that was holding me back," she replied. I had never heard such nonsense in my life, but I knew I had to keep talking if I wanted to get to the bottom of this. And how exactly did he do that? Hypnotism? Pills? There had to be something that made this happen. I pressed on. Joyce was quiet for a moment before she finally admitted, "We used a bit of hash to find our inner selves." Her voice was very soft. "Just wonderful. He gives you pills, and suddenly everything is different. Tell me, Joyce, how many others came back and told their husbands they wanted a divorce today?" "I do not know. she said quietly, still sounding defensive. That is not true. Women talk about everything. Do not lie to me, I asserted. Maybe one other, she finally admitted. Well, is that not interesting? Why did the other 10 not go along with it, Joyce? Maybe the hash did not mess up their brains like it did yours, I said sharply. You do not need to talk like that, she snapped. I knew what was happening. I believed in his ideas more than the others did, she said. God, Joyce, I never thought you were so naive. But I guess I was wrong, I said, getting up to grab a beer from the fridge. I am not naive. I am smarter than any of the others. I understood what he was saying and what it could mean for me, she said angrily. I just shook my head as I stood by the counter, looking down at her. The beer tasted awful, so I put it down. My mind was in chaos. I could not think straight. Is there nothing I can say to save our marriage? I asked quietly. She looked up at me, tears beginning to fill her eyes. I am sorry, Jeff. I have made up my mind. And that was it. I picked up my car keys and walked out of the house without another word. The next months were the hardest of my life and changed me into the angry, tough, middle-aged man I am now. I stopped caring about what anyone thought or needed. I went to work, did my 8 hours, and went home to an empty house. I put the house up for sale the same week Joyce filed for divorce and sold it within 3 weeks. My lawyer, Scotty Olson, told me to put the money in a separate account and help protect my finances from Joyce. It was the usual divorce routine. Cancel the credit cards, move my things from the safety deposit box, and secure my savings. When Scotty found out who Joyce's lawyer was, he called me immediately. Jeff, this woman is ruthless. She will try to take everything you have. She has a terrible reputation from a male point of view. I cannot handle this case. She will destroy me. I suggest you get Mark Mosevich to represent you. He might be able to lessen the damage, he said, clearly unsettled. Good luck, Jeff. You will need it. He was right. Claire LaPointe came after me like I was a monster who had hurt Joyce every day of our marriage. Calling her vicious would not even begin to describe her approach toward Mark and me. I thought about fighting the divorce just to make things difficult for Joyce, but Mark talked me out of it, and I am glad he did. We worked out the settlement on paper, and I finally gave in. I am sure Joyce got more than half, but I did not have the stomach for a fight despite my anger. I was left with a large legal bill, and my share of the house barely got me a cheap condo in Guelph. The only smart move I made, with Mark's advice, was insisting that Joyce agree the settlement was final and could not be changed later. She had a good job, and since there was no cause for the divorce, at least I did not have to pay support. I had not seen Joyce since I walked out of our house that Sunday. Life can be strange. Just before the divorce was finalized, I got a call from a large American company. Years ago, in my spare time, I had invented a small electrical device that sensed tiny changes in temperature and would activate other systems in response. It did not seem like much, but on a hunch, I patented it myself. I had not used company resources or worked on it during company hours, so I had no issue registering the patent in my name. After getting the patent, I forgot about it. It was not included in the divorce because the paperwork was not in my safety deposit box. It was in a shoebox in my bedroom closet. I guess Joyce forgot about it too. The American company had created a new gadget for something else, but when they tried to patent it, they found my design in the way. They called me to buy it, and I agreed, telling them to speak to my lawyer, Scotty Olson, to negotiate a deal. Scotty was excellent at negotiation. I hoped to get at least $100,000, but Scotty had bigger plans. In the end, he got $5.5 million for me, paid over 10 years. Scotty took 10%, and the rest was mine. We decided not to sign anything until my divorce was finalized. My first day as a single man, I was set for life. I did not have to work again if I did not want to. Feeling the way I did, that was for the best. I quit my job and went back to my apartment to think about my future. I thought about moving west. 2 months later, I sold my condo in Guelph for a small profit and drove to the West Coast in my new Range Rover. It took me over a week because I wanted to see the country and take my time. I was still sad and angry, but more controlled. My marriage was over, and it was now just a part of my past. I was not sure who or what I was mad at. Maybe Joyce, her boss, the Swami, Claire LaPointe, or Ontario's divorce laws. Probably all of them. I had no real plan other than reaching the coast. I drove around Vancouver, but found it to be just another crowded city surrounded by beauty. Houses I liked were too expensive or in packed, cookie-cutter neighborhoods. I wanted to be near the water, which meant it would be pricier. So, I took the ferry to Vancouver Island to continue my search. When I arrived in Courtenay and Comox Valley, I knew I had found my place, the Georgia Strait on one side and Mount Washington on the other. The area was developed but not too crowded, and the lot sizes were larger than in Vancouver or Victoria. The hills provided great views of the strait, and the population was sparse. The place had everything I needed: a hospital, a shopping center, and a liquor store. It was perfect. I stayed at a local motel and visited a well-known international real estate office the next morning. That decision would change my life in ways I never expected. I relied heavily on the internet and needed a reliable connection. I also set up a composting system for waste disposal, taking the rest to the dump when necessary. During my first renovation, I improved the insulation and replaced the windows. I also wanted a better heating system, so I installed a combination of solar-heated water and a wood fireplace to warm the house. For additional warmth, I kept a couple of portable heaters. The gas range and oven in the kitchen ran on propane, and I managed the refills myself. The refrigerator, freezer, and microwave did not use much power. Using my engineering skills, I made the house as self-sufficient and energy-efficient as possible. I did not want to rely on external services. I had considered installing a biodiesel generator, but they were not common yet, and I did not want to experiment with improving technology. Without realizing it, I had designed my life for solitude. Though I would not admit it at the time, that was the inevitable outcome. After my encounter with the traffic officer and the cop, I calmed down, made myself a sandwich, and grabbed a beer for lunch. I had built a large cedar deck at the front of my house, offering an incredible view of the Gulf, the mainland mountains, and the passing boats. That afternoon, I watched the ferry traveling from Powell River to Comox and spotted some large yachts, likely on their way to Desolation Sound. I owned a powerful pair of binoculars and could usually identify ships and their origins. The Alaska cruise ships passed by just before or at sundown this time of year. I finished my beer and leaned back in my comfortable deck chair, which I had purchased the year before. Closing my eyes, I let the warmth of the sun wash over me, knowing that soon, the towering hemlocks and cedars would block most of its light. Until then, I relied on the sunscreen I had applied a few minutes earlier in the shade of the large umbrella at the center of the table. The warmth made me drowsy, and before I knew it, I had drifted off. I woke with a start, needing a second to understand why I had jolted awake. My mind replayed the sound of a twig snapping, and then I recognized the low hum of a car approaching my private road. The main road was at least 100 meters away, and due to the hill and the bend in the driveway, I could not see any vehicles until they were quite close to the house. A white compact car appeared, looking relatively new. I could not make out the driver through the dark-tinted windows. I was about to stand up when the driver's door opened. Out stepped my ex-wife, Joyce. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. I must have fallen back into my chair, staring at her in disbelief. I did not say a word or move an inch as she slowly walked toward me. "Hello, Jeff," she said quietly. She looked nervous, and she had every reason to be. We had not spoken or written to each other since the divorce, and we had parted on bitter terms. I immediately wondered if she had found out about the patent and had come to stake her claim. If that was the case, she would get her share when pigs flew. "What do you want?" I asked harshly. "I see you are still the same old Jeff," she said without a smile. "Cut the nonsense, Joyce. What do you want?" I repeated. "Family business," she answered simply. She glanced around for a place to sit, but I had the only chair on the deck, and I was not about to offer it to her. I wanted to keep her unsettled for as long as possible. "Can you get me a chair?" she finally asked. I did not respond immediately, instead giving her a look of pure disdain. Slowly, I got up and went inside to find another chair. There was one in the spare bedroom, though it was dusty. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom, wiped it down, and returned to the deck. I should have made her clean it herself. I was already being too generous. I unfolded the chair, set it across the table from me, and returned to my seat. "What family business?" I asked. "Your children want to know what happened to you. You disappeared, and they have not heard from you. I had to hire someone to find you," she said in a tone laced with irritation. "What do they want with me?" "Rick has his own life far away, and Kirsten is in some commune in the Rockies. She is probably just like her mother," I sneered. "Rick is in Alberta and has been for weeks. Kirsten left the commune and runs a daycare center in Calgary. She does not do pills and never did. Unlike her mother," I snapped. "Do you hate them as much as you hate me?" she asked. No, I do not hate them. I thought you had turned them against me. You were so far gone that I did not know what you had told them. But they seemed to think everything was my fault, so I decided to leave them alone, I replied. I never turned them against you. You were so angry that they could not talk to you. You scared Kirsten. She was afraid you might do something violent. And Beverly was so upset she would not let Rick speak to you or let you see your grandchildren. That is how bad it was, Jeff. Too bad. I do not need their approval. Let them cozy up to you, I spat. What is the matter with you? Are you going to live the rest of your life carrying this much hate? You will not live past 60 if you keep this up. It will eat you alive. She shouted. I looked into her eyes and thought I saw a flicker of fear. Why did she care? She had thrown me away like an old shoe, and now she was concerned about me? What was going on here? Joyce, why do you care? You did not care 2 years ago. Why do you care what happens to me now? I asked, still baffled. She did not answer right away. Instead, she stood up, walked around the deck, and gazed out at the view, lost in thought. I remained silent, letting her process whatever it was she needed to say. Finally, she turned back toward me, leaning against the railing. You have a beautiful home, Jeff. The view is wonderful. It must be amazing at sunset, she said with a small smile. Sunrise, I corrected her. You are looking east. The sunrise is special. The sunset is behind the mountain, I said, pointing over my shoulder. Oh, how did you find this place? She asked, walking slowly back to the table. I kept looking until I found what I wanted, and then I bought it, I said simply. Where are you working? Do you work from home? She asked, placing both hands on the back of the deck chair. I am retired. I do not work anymore. Really? I am surprised. I thought you would need to. I mean, how could you afford this? She finally asked the question that had been on her mind the entire time. You mean after your lawyer, Claire, got done with me? Is that what you mean, Joyce? I snapped. I did not realize how terrible she had been until it was too late. I should have stopped her. I did not want to ruin you. I just wanted what was mine, she said apologetically. Well, that may have been your goal, but Claire wanted me destroyed. And she nearly succeeded, I said calmly. So how did you manage to buy this place? She asked again. None of your business, I spat. She looked shocked, about to say something, but then thought better of it. She turned back toward the railing, her back to me. I studied her, still trying to understand why she was here. Had she really traveled 3,000 miles just to tell me my kids wanted to hear from me? She had paid someone to track me down. She could have just written a letter and avoided all of this emotional mess. There was more to this than she was letting on, and I intended to find out exactly what it was. I admit it. It gets worse, she said quietly. I knew the divorce was a mistake, and I tried to stop it, but Claire would not let me. She told me I was just having second thoughts and that the damage was already done. She was very forceful, and I guess I let her push me around. Yeah, I can see that, I said coldly. If that so-called friend of yours could get you to do what you did, I doubt it was difficult for Claire to push you in whatever direction she wanted. There was no comfort in my voice. Joyce sat down in the chair again, and we sat in silence for a while. So here we are. Joyce, I said finally. 2 lives completely wrecked beyond recognition. Is this what you call a grand life? My voice was filled with resignation. It does not have to be this way. Jeff, she said almost shyly. What do you mean? I snapped. I mean we could start over. We could try to put it back together, she said, as if she was afraid to speak the words aloud. Oh, come on, Joyce. Grow up, I said, shaking my head. You destroyed me. You could not have done a better job if you had carved me into pieces. You left me with nothing, not even my self-respect. I was shouting at her now, my face undoubtedly red with anger. You think I hate you? That just proves you still do not understand. I do not hate you, Joyce. I love you. I always have, and it is my curse that I probably always will. But you took me apart and threw me away. It is not hate you are seeing, it is anger. I am furious. I am angry at everyone and everything that put me in this place, stripped of all hope. I am angry because I knew you were making a mistake. I am angry because you would not listen to reason. I am angry because I could not convince you that you were wrong. I am angry because I could not stop any of these awful things from happening to us. Does that explain it clearly enough? She was in tears now, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking. I had finally let out my emotions, but I did not feel any better. It would take more than a confession to mend the damage. I got up, went into the kitchen, and poured 2 glasses of wine. I was fairly certain she still drank white wine, and I had an open bottle from the previous evening's meal. When I returned to the deck, Joyce was wiping away her tears with a small tissue. "Have you had lunch? Can I get you something to eat?" I asked quietly. She just nodded, accepting my offer, and I went back inside. I made up a plate of cheese and crackers and pulled out some pâté I had saved from the week before. I opened another bottle of white wine and left it in the fridge before bringing the food out to the deck. "Where are you staying tonight?" I asked softly. "I do not know," she admitted. "I thought I would find a motel. I was not sure if you would be home. I did not even know if you would talk to me." "You can stay here," I said, shrugging. "I have a spare room, and you can be sure there will not be any funny business." I forced a small, humorless smile. She nodded and gave a faint smile in return. "Thanks. I am tired, but I still want to talk. If you will let me," she said carefully. After we finished eating, I took the dishes inside and refilled our wine glasses. Then I asked Joyce if she wanted a tour of the property. We walked around as I explained how I had chosen where to live and why. She seemed to understand, and both of us had calmed down after our heated argument. It felt oddly freeing to express my emotions to her, even though it did not fix anything. I meant it when I said I still loved her, but saying those words hurt and stirred up my anger again. I told myself I would not let that happen, but I was not sure I could keep that promise. I set up the barbecue on the deck and grilled a couple of steaks. I had not been eating much lately, which helped keep my weight down, along with regular exercise. Joyce noticed and mentioned that I looked healthy. Spending time outdoors had given me a permanent tan, which might have fooled people into thinking I was in peak shape. After dinner, we sat on the deck until the sun went down and the mosquitoes arrived. Joyce had brought her travel bag inside earlier and set up in the spare room with clean sheets and a fresh pillowcase. We had shared a bottle of French red wine, and I offered her a brandy. We sat in 2 large chairs by the fireplace. Over the past few hours, Joyce had opened up about her life after the divorce. It was clear she had struggled. She could not undo her mistake, and she had fallen into depression. She had seen a psychiatrist for several months, which had helped, but only somewhat. She quit her job and started working at a long-term care hospital. The pay was not great, but she had minimal needs since she had no social life. When her daughter, Kirsten, called and told her about opening a daycare center, Joyce thought it was the perfect opportunity. She moved to Calgary a year ago in September and began to rebuild herself. If the Swami had done anything right, it was pointing out that she did not belong in the insurance business. She had been meant to nurture, and working in childcare had been the right fit for her. Their business had thrived, thanks to a shortage of workers and a growing population. They had even applied for a grant to expand their facility in southwest Calgary and build another one in north central Calgary. The grant was approved, and a contractor was ready to begin construction. I was both surprised and impressed by how well they had done, especially since it had seemed like a sudden career change. Joyce credited Kirsten, saying she was the driving force behind the operation. It was Kirsten who had suggested expanding and securing funding. I was even more shocked, considering the last I had heard. She was living in a commune in the Kootenays. It just went to show, you never really knew your kids. Our son, Rick, was now in Edmonton. His wife, Beverly, had grown tired of moving from project to project in Eastern Europe and wanted to return to North America. When a job opened with interprovincial pipelines, Rick took it. They had settled into a nice home in the southwest part of the city and had no plans to move again. Joyce wanted me to call them, to let them know I was okay, but I told her I was not ready yet. I did not mind if she told them about our meeting, but I needed time to figure out how to explain everything, to help them understand. I was curious about what Joyce had told them about our breakup. Eventually, she admitted the truth. I told them their mother was a foolish, selfish woman who did not appreciate what she had. I told them I hurt you deeply and that I probably could not make it right. I told them it was not your fault, that you were a great husband, and that I was the crazy one, she confessed. And how did they react? I asked. I do not think they believed me. They thought I was hiding something, that I could not tell them the truth. They believed I could do no wrong. So it had to be you, she said sadly. Well, that makes 3 of us, I said. I used to think the same thing. There had to be something I had done wrong, something I had missed, that caused all of this. So, I guess I understand how the kids feel now. Joyce was near tears again, and I got up to get us another brandy. We sat by the fireplace for a while, and at some point, I must have dozed off. When I woke, the clock on the wall read 11:15. Joyce was not in her chair. Then I spotted her. She had moved to the floor beside me and had fallen asleep. leaning against my chair. I reached down and gently ran my fingers through her hair. Then, suddenly, I began to cry. I cried hard, like I had not since I was 9 years old, when my dog died. My body shook with sobs, and the tears came in waves. I cried for everything I had lost. I cried for Joyce, for myself, for our children, and for the life we had destroyed. And as I felt Joyce's arm around me, I realized, despite everything, I still felt completely alone. It was clear she only worked for women. This woman seemed like she had a mission, to ruin as many men as possible. I thought there might be more to her story. After gathering all the information I could, I tracked down the men she had targeted. Again, I had all the time in the world, and I had a mission. One by one, I contacted these men and asked if they were interested in my plan for revenge. I spoke to 20 men, and 11 of them said yes. That seemed like enough, but I had more names if needed. The plan was simple but risky, with no guarantee it would work. I believe this woman hated men and probably acted on this in her personal life. There was only one way to find out. I proposed that each of us contribute up to $500 to hire a private detective to investigate her private life. 11 men agreed. Those who did not join us mostly could not afford it, having been left nearly broke. I promised to keep them updated. No matter what, they were with us in spirit. Scotty knew a detective named Terry Bolton who could do the job. Since we did not plan to take this to court, we trusted he would use any means necessary to get the information, as long as he did not tell us how he obtained it. I met with Terry at his uptown office. It looked nothing like the smoky, cluttered detective offices I had seen in movies. It was modern and efficient. I explained our situation, how many men had been hurt by this woman, and our goal to get something on her. Terry was cautious but understanding. He explained what he could and could not do legally. In the end, he agreed to take on the case. I gave him a $2,000 advance, and he promised to keep me updated. I had to trust him and hope I was not wasting everyone's money. It took almost 2 weeks to hear back from Terry, but the wait was worth it. Well, I found some interesting stuff about Miss LaPointe. Terry began. She is definitely a lesbian. Moreover, she does not stick to one partner. She has several girlfriends. I am also quite sure she is the dominant one in these relationships, very dominant, he said with a hint of satisfaction. Nice work, Terry, I replied. I suspected as much. What is our next step? Well, Miss LaPointe is not very careful. She often meets her friends at her apartment near her office. She does not live there, but she uses it for business and personal meetings, he said. Let's just say if someone wanted to bug her place, she makes it pretty easy. I could almost hear the smile in his voice and hoped he could imagine the one on mine. So this makes things quite simple, does it not? I suggested. Quite. I will get back to you, but you should know. I am going to spend more of your money, he said, looking serious. How much more? I asked. Probably another $2,500, maybe a bit more, he answered. Okay, we can handle that. I just hope we get something really good, I said. I will call you when I have something worthwhile, he said, ending the call. 10 days later, Terry called and asked me to meet him at his office. He had something to show me. I agreed immediately, and we set up a meeting for the next morning. I was eager, hoping we had finally gotten something useful. I walked into Terry's office, feeling hopeful. Well, Jeff, I think I have what you need, he began. But you must never reveal how you got this. If anyone asks, I will deny everything. Understood. We have no reason to tell anyone anything that would cause trouble for you. Only 2 people even know you are the one who hired you, I assured him. Good. Why do you not come around here, and I will show you what I have got, he suggested. Terry had a laptop on his desk and had inserted a DVD. He moved the mouse, and the video screen came up. He clicked the play button. What followed shocked me. It began with Claire LaPointe in a strange outfit made of shiny black material. She was in a plain-looking bedroom. She was not a beautiful woman by any means, and she looked more muscular than I had expected. As the video continued, it became difficult to watch. The young girl was clearly in pain but did not try to get away, even though she was not tied up. The more I watched, the more I wondered how old she was and where she had come from. How old do you think that girl is? I finally asked. Do not know, but I am trying to find out. It is not illegal if she agrees and is over 14, but there are rules about dependency or trust, like with teachers or priests. It would be hard to prosecute, but just showing this to her corporate clients could be enough, he said seriously. I was disgusted by what I saw and wondered if there was more. Is this the only young person she used? I asked. No. She has several, and I know from listening to her phone calls that there are more. Some of them are street kids, I am sure. Whether she pays them, I do not know, but I will find out sooner or later, he said as if he was talking about buying a new suit. There is more, and you will not like this one any better, he said. He clicked the mouse, and the screen showed Claire leading a young boy with a collar around his neck over to the bed and pushing him face down on it, just like with the girl. Jesus Christ, I exclaimed. She is not going to do what I think she is going to do, is she? I looked at Terry in shock. Oh yes, she is. And this one is even worse. You said she hated men. This will show you how much, he said grimly. The boy looked very young. He was thin and pale, and I guessed he was maybe 16, if that. What followed was awful, and I cannot even describe it. I do not think I will ever forget that image. Claire stood with her hands on her hips, a little smile on her face. Then she took off the strap-on, and everything went dark. I had always known Claire Lapointe was cruel, especially when it came to men, particularly married ones. But I had not known she could be this bad. I had wanted to get back at her before, but now it had become personal. It had started as revenge for how she had handled my divorce, but now it was about something much bigger. Terry, I cannot believe these kids are doing this willingly. They must need money. They must be desperate, like street kids, I said after thinking for a moment. Yeah, I thought the same. But she calls them on the phone. I do not see how these kids would have phones unless she gives them, he replied. These days, you can get cheap phones and just throw them away when you're done. Maybe that is what she is doing, I said, sitting on the corner of his desk, deep in thought. I needed a way to stop this woman, but I could not think of anything solid. How many of these videos do you have so far? I asked. 4. 3 girls and 1 boy. What do we do now? Nothing. I have friends on the police force. I have shown them what I have, and they are going to keep an eye on her. They are trying to get enough evidence for a warrant and to catch her in the act. I trust them to handle this well. Some other officers have had dealings with her too. Can I have a copy of the DVD? I asked, unsure if I really wanted it. Sure. You paid for it. Just remember, if anyone asks, you got it in the mail, with no return address and no note. Understood. Understood. I left Terry's office, my mind racing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like justice was coming. 6 typed pages, 3 audio tapes, 10 photos, and a plain envelope. They might as well have been parts of a bomb. I packed everything into the envelope, placed it in my briefcase, took a sip of water, grabbed my jacket, and quietly left my office. I will be gone for the rest of the day, Elizabeth. If it is urgent, call my cell. I might not answer, but leave a message, I said quietly to Elizabeth, the woman who managed my work life. Elizabeth looked at me and heard the tone in my voice. Are you okay, Mark? She asked. She was the only one who called me by my first name. She knew me almost as well as my wife, Caroline. I might not be in on Monday, Elizabeth. I will call and let you know what is going on. Take care, Mark, she said sincerely. I noticed she did not wish me a good weekend. Her intuition probably told her it was not going to be one. When I walked into the snug, I saw Bob sitting in the farthest booth. There were others around, but the high backs gave us enough privacy. The noise level was moderate, so we would not have to speak loudly. I slid into the seat and shook his hand. I was sure my face looked dark, and Bob skipped the small talk. The waitress came by, and we both ordered double scotch, his with ice, mine with a side of water. We chatted until the drinks arrived. I raised my glass to his, and he did the same. He looked at me, waiting. Bob, I found out Caroline is having an affair. Oh God, Mark, I am so sorry. I never would have thought. She never seemed unhappy. His voice trailed off. No, I am just as shocked. I had no clue she was seeing someone, I replied. How did you find out? He asked. About 6 weeks ago, I got a call from some guy asking if I knew what my wife did on Friday afternoons. He hung up after that, and I shrugged it off as a prank call. The next Friday, we were having a dinner party with her real estate friends, and I realized I had forgotten to do something. I never called her on Fridays because she always said she needed that day to prepare for open houses, but this time, I called her office. Her assistant said she had left early, like she did every Friday around 1:30. That felt strange. I called home, no answer. Then I called back and asked her assistant where she was, only to be told she never worked Friday afternoons. It did not make sense. And then I remembered that strange call. I started feeling like something else was going on. I paused and took a sip of my drink, hoping it would settle my nerves. No such luck. What did it mean? Bob asked. Where would she go? Bob had not said anything since I started talking. He was listening very closely to my story. When she came home that afternoon, I asked her about her day. She said it was fine, but that she hated being in the office when the weather was so nice. Bob, I felt a pit in my stomach when she said that. I knew she was lying. I struggled to keep myself together. After that, I kept hoping and praying there was a good reason for everything. On Saturday, she left before 9 for work, leaving me alone. I had forgotten to buy flowers for the dinner party that night, so I went out to the florist and stopped for a coffee on the way home. I could not stop thinking about where she might be and who she might be with. I remembered that Caroline kept a planner on her home office computer. When I got home, I checked the past few Fridays. There were plenty of notes for the mornings and a few lunch meetings, but nothing for the afternoons except a weird code. Some Fridays had AK, others had BK. They seemed to alternate, but not always. I checked back to the start of the year, and almost every Friday had one of those codes. I would be suspicious too, Mark, Bob said. What did you do to find out more? I did something I never thought I would do. I hired a private detective to figure out what she was up to. Bob, I felt awful about that decision. I bet you did. Anyway, what happened? I hired a young guy from the firm that handles our company's legal work. I made sure no one knew he was working on a personal matter. This firm handles problems like theft and pills for us. I gave him all the info I just told you, plus a photo of Caroline, her car and license plate number, and her phone number. I also gave him permission to bug our phone and, if needed, set up audio and video equipment in the house. It is all legal since it is our home, and I gave permission. It took him 2 weeks to get back to me. Caroline was leaving the office before 2 on Friday afternoons and either going home or to another house. He found out that another person was meeting her at our house around 2:30 and stayed for a couple of hours before leaving. He followed that person to another house. He was reluctant to tell me more at that point, but said he had set up some equipment in our house to monitor the living room, master bedroom, guest room, and her office. The phones were also set to record calls. I felt really sick. I did not know how I would face Caroline without losing my temper or showing that I knew something. Jesus, Mark. I cannot believe this. I would not know what to do, Bob said, shaking his head. It was hard, but I had to see it through. I had to wait for the big reveal. I continued. That happened this morning. The detective confirmed she was having an affair and had proof. It was worse than I imagined. Christ, Mark, can it get any worse? Bob asked, looking distressed. It can, Bob, I said, pulling a manila envelope from my briefcase and passing it to him. He looked at me and slowly took out the contents. Bob started reading the report but soon pulled out the photos. I saw shock on his face. He went pale and gasped. It cannot be. This is a trick. He looked at me, pleading for it to be false. I wish it was, Bob, I said. I really wish it was. The pictures clearly showed Caroline and Bob's wife, Karen, together. Bob was stunned. He looked like he might faint, but somehow he managed to sit back and stare blankly at the photos. I took another sip of my drink while Bob quickly finished reading, his eyes never leaving the photos. He looked lost, like he did not know what to do. His breathing became shallow. I put my hand on his and took the photos, putting them back in the envelope. Bob, let me tell you what is in the report, I began. He nodded slightly, still in shock. I explained that the audio tapes were just as revealing as the photos. The report detailed how Caroline and Karen had used various items. The detective found where they were hidden in our house and listed them all. For what it is worth, Bob, the tapes indicate that Caroline was the dominant one, and Karen followed her lead. It seemed like Karen might have been pressured or seduced into the relationship and was not strong enough to resist. I cannot prove it, but after listening to the tapes and knowing both Karen and Caroline, I think it is highly likely. That does not make me feel any better, Mark. I am really upset. I cannot believe Karen would do something like this. It is not like her. There must be some reason, Bob said, searching for answers only Karen could give. I think the A or B in her calendar refers to our houses. A could be my house, and B could be yours, but I am not sure. If you are right, Mark, then Karen will be at your house in about half an hour with Caroline. I had been thinking about this all morning. I have decided I am going to confront them. You can come with me or stay. It is your choice, and I will understand if you do not want to be there. We sat in silence. Bob was trying to decide what to do. Finally, he looked up. I think I should be there when it all goes down. She might be very upset, and I should take her home. All right, Bob. I understand. Your lies speak for themselves. Cheating is cheating. Period. Mark, cannot you forgive me? She begged. For heaven's sake, Caroline, cannot you come up with something better to say? My disdain was clear. You have broken our marriage vows. Do you get that? Yes. I am so sorry. I never meant to. I would never. She finally ran out of words. By the way, Caroline, how long has this been going on? I really wanted to know how long she had been lying to me and if she would tell me the truth. Not long. A while. How long is that? I demanded. There was a long pause. Since last fall, she whispered. My God. Last fall was over 6 months ago. This was not some brief mistake. It was a full-blown affair. And I was furious. Why do you hate me so much? She suddenly asked. I do not hate you, Caroline. I am beyond that. I felt sick, angry, and sad. Now, there is hardly any feeling for you left. You have destroyed me, Caroline. You have driven a sword through my heart. I loved you with everything I had for 23 years. I never once dreamed of cheating on you. But you did not feel the same. And now, it is over. I had said all I needed to say about my feelings. No. Please, Mark, do not do this. Please. She was desperate. Sorry, Caroline. The process has already started. You will probably receive the divorce papers on Monday. The reason will be your infidelity. No, Mark, no. Please do not do this. What will I do without you? She was begging, but she gave no real reasons. What about the children? I had expected her to mention them. Our kids were almost adults. Catherine, or Kat, was 20 and studying to be a teacher. She believed in making learning exciting. She might become a great teacher or stay in school earning degrees and marry a professor. Michael, her 18-year-old brother, was a freshman at the same college. He was serious about his business studies but also popular on campus, enjoying his college life. Both lived on campus because we could afford it, and they did not want the long commute. I will tell them I'm divorcing you because you cheated. I will tell them there is no chance of us getting back together. If they ask, I will tell them your affair lasted for months. I will not tell them who you cheated with, but you know they are close to their Uncle Bob and Aunt Karen. I cannot control what they might find out, so what you tell them is up to you. Caroline was crying softly, her face buried in her hands. For a moment, I felt sorry and guilty, but then I remembered the last few hours, and I became cold again. I am sure our parents will call. I will tell mine the same thing I tell our kids, the reasons, the timeline, the planning, and that we will not be getting back together. As for your parents, they will likely want to know why I am not giving you a second chance. If they push me and blame me instead of you, I will tell them everything. So I suggest you be honest with them first. I then explained the difficult issues our divorce would cause. Think about the other effects, Caroline. We live in a small town. You are a well-known real estate agent and a member of the Chamber of Commerce. You are in touch with important people. The news of our divorce will spread, and people will talk. When they do not get answers, rumors will start. My brother Bob is on the committee for the Chamber of Commerce chair position, a post you want. You have also hinted at running for city council. A messy divorce, and any hint of wrongdoing, would ruin those dreams. Many people see us as the perfect couple. If we divorce suddenly, they will ask questions. Since I am a key employer in our community, I cannot afford to have my reputation questioned. If people ask, I will say it is because you were unfaithful. Caroline was struggling with my words. I had hit her with one bad consequence after another without giving her a break. It was time to stop for both of us. I needed to stay calm and clear-headed, even if I was angry and upset. I went to the liquor cabinet and poured myself another drink. I looked at Caroline and asked if she wanted anything. She shook her head without looking up. I had crushed her with the weight of the troubles she was about to face. I stood at the edge of the kitchen, watching her as I sipped my drink. It is not the same, you know, she finally said in a flat voice. What is not the same? Being with a woman. It was always better with you. I would never have cheated on you with a man. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, it is just the truth. It was always better with you. I love you, Mark. I always will. That will not change, no matter what happens. I suppose I will always love you too, Caroline, at least in the memories of before. Before this, I was slipping into sadness and gloom, something I had tried hard to avoid. I needed to take control of the conversation again. Maybe it was a lecture at this point, but either way, I needed to get back on track. You were not nice to Karen, from what I heard. Did you treat her badly? I was curious about the relationship between the two women I once thought were friends. It was role-playing. It was not real. It let us play like actors and be different from who we are in real life, she said, her head still down, staring at the table. Well, you fooled me. It sounded real to me. It sounded real to Bob, too. You might think you forced or lured Karen into this. Is that what happened? She looked up at me for what felt like a long minute, then dropped her head again and said nothing. You should know, if Karen says you coerced her, Bob could sue you for alienation of affection. That would be really messy. Another hit to her already sinking spirit. One last thing, Caroline. I want my grandmother's engagement ring back. She gave it to me to give to you. It is a family heirloom. No, please. Not that too, she begged. Caroline, I have never hurt you or even yelled at you until today, but I swear, if you do not give me that ring, I will take it from you. I watched as she slowly took the ring off and pushed it across the table to me. Thank you. What happens now? She asked weakly. Good question. I suggest you go to work tomorrow and Sunday. You will need an income on your own. I have packed a bag and will live somewhere else for now. You should get a lawyer to protect yourself. You will need one. He can contact my lawyer through my office. I did not tell her that I had already spoken to my lawyer, and he would do everything to limit what she could get from our marriage. We lived in a no-fault divorce state, and I needed to protect my assets. I hoped her income and the reason for our breakup would keep me from having to make payments, but I was not optimistic. Sadly for Caroline, the house was mine before our marriage, so it was not part of the split. I had also spoken to my friend Frank Khalidi, who worked at the bank. He agreed to help me move money from our shared accounts and cancel our joint credit cards. Frank would also retrieve my family heirlooms, insurance papers, jewelry, and other important documents from our safe deposit box. He would be ready to help me first thing in the morning, ensuring Caroline could not do anything first. I would change my will on Monday at my lawyer's office when we finalized the divorce paperwork. It was time to leave. I had said everything I needed to say, and I was exhausted. This day would always stay in my mind as one of the worst of my life. Is there anything you want to say before I go? I asked. She looked up at me with a sad face. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Finally, she bowed her head and whispered, I love you, Mark. I am sorry. I love you. And that was it. It did not feel satisfying. I did not feel like I had won. She was broken, and we both knew it. Standing in the aftermath, I thought of Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. 3 years later, the ripples from that terrible day have almost stopped, but the damage remains. I do not think I will ever know why Caroline started her lies and deception. Maybe she does not know either. I wondered if Karen had ever told Bob how it all started. But I doubt it, and I do not think Bob wanted to know as he tried to rebuild his life. Bob worked hard to repair his relationship with Karen after that terrible day. They continued living together, and Bob told me they became close again soon after. But deep down, he knew things would never be the same. The trust and unconditional love they once shared were gone. Bob still loved Karen deeply, and she never stopped loving him, but the damage was done. The dark shadow over their marriage never lifted, and less than a year later, Bob filed for divorce, admitting they could not fix what was broken. Karen knew they would never move past what had happened, so she left without arguing. She stayed with Caroline for a short while before moving back in with her parents. After that, she became almost invisible. Bob continued sending support checks to her parents' home, but they were sometimes cashed a month late, and in the last 6 months, they were not cashed at all. When he called her mother, he was told Karen had left and would not be coming back. They did not know where she was. Bob felt deep sadness for Karen. He knew she had been as much a victim as a participant, but he could not live with the memories. I spoke to Bob a few weeks ago. He mentioned that a major grocery store chain was interested in buying his 2 stores, one at each end of town. The deal was lucrative, enough that he would never have to work again if he did not want to. He was strongly considering selling, but was unsure what he would do with his time. The offer was too good to turn down. When I spoke to him last week, he told me he had signed the papers and was going to work at a garden center. Gardening was his passion, and staying busy would help him keep his mind off Karen and the past. Bob and I still meet occasionally for a drink or a meal. We remain close, but the past has left its scars. I hope we can fully restore the bond we once had. I love my brother, and I wanted to find happiness with someone new. Our children are now adults and living their own lives. Catherine is teaching in a nearby town, and I see her about once a month. She has managed to stay close to both her mother and me without taking sides. I do not know what Caroline told her about the divorce, but I have honored our agreement. Kat has never asked me for details. Both she and her brother were deeply saddened by Uncle Bob and Aunt Karen's breakup. Catherine has a man in her life, but she is not ready for marriage yet. Michael, however, is furious with his mother and refuses to see or speak to her. I am not sure how much he knows about the divorce, but he is aware of more than just the basics. Catherine has told me that his attitude toward women has changed drastically. He has become distrustful and his behavior has not been good. He is finishing his final year in business administration and plans to move to the city after graduation. I do not see him as much as I would like, and I feel he is uncomfortable around me. I hope he will be able to move past this difficult period and find someone he can love and trust. Caroline is still in town, struggling to maintain her real estate business. As expected, rumors spread quickly. She faced embarrassment and social isolation. She was passed over for the Chamber of Commerce leadership role and shunned by her colleagues. She became lonely, and according to Catherine, she is now a bitter and hardened woman. She moved out of our house immediately and rented a small apartment near her office. I recently heard she dated a couple of men, but ended those relationships quickly. Given how much the community has talked about her, I would not be surprised if she eventually moves away for a fresh start. She is a skilled real estate agent, so she should be able to make a decent living, but only if she can escape the weight of local gossip. As for me, I live alone in my big house. My kids visit me occasionally. I have not felt ready to find a new partner, but perhaps that will change someday. I focus on my work and try to maintain good relationships with my employees. It has been difficult because rumors about me also circulate, and there is nothing I can do to stop them. I never felt the need to explain the details of my marriages and to everyone, but I could see the curiosity in people's eyes. I have gone through all the emotions someone in my position would experience. I questioned myself. I wondered if I could have handled things differently. If I had never told Bob and had only confronted Caroline privately, would things have ended better? Should I have tried to salvage our marriage? But no matter what, the images from that afternoon, the photographs, will never leave me. They are burned into my mind. I realized it was pointless to imagine different outcomes. I was furious when I learned how much Caroline would receive from our assets despite her betrayal. I now have a low opinion of no-fault divorce. It should be called no-responsibility divorce. But in the end, it did not ruin me financially. I send Caroline a small check each month, and she cashes it immediately. The settlement was based on her last 3 years of income, which were some of her best. The judge determined she did not require much financial support from me. Her life has become much simpler. My sharp and skilled executive assistant, Elizabeth, has retired, and I miss her more than I expected. She was like an extra brain and heart for me. She was the only person I told the full, messy truth to. Even my lawyer did not know all the details. Her advice kept me sane. Her friendship saved me during those first few months. She knew me as well as a twin would. Her replacement, a capable middle-aged woman named Florence, is efficient at her job but not Elizabeth. I never discovered who made the anonymous phone call. It might have been a nosy neighbor or someone from Caroline's office. I will probably never know. A larger company is considering purchasing my business. I am torn between leaving the past behind and staying in the career I once loved. If I sell, the buyer may close my company and merge it with their operations, leaving over 150 employees without jobs. I cannot live with that. I have considered including a no-closure clause in the sale agreement, but even if the buyer agreed, they could find ways around it. I do not know what my future looks like. I know I am responsible for my own actions. I gathered the evidence. I confronted the truth. I faced the consequences. Now, I stand alone, looking at the wreckage. In the end, we all became victims of the damage.